Here's everything you might have missed in Moon Knight Episode 3. Welcome back, Marvel Maniacs, to our weekly breakdown of the continuing adventures of Moonathan Taylor Thomas, aka Moon Knight. This week's episode of Moon Knight shifted the action from London to Egypt, gave us a healthy dose of Egyptian mythology, and introduced some deep-cut comic book characters for good measure. We're going to break it all down for you in just a moment, but as always, if you prefer to read all about it, Rosie Knight has you covered over on Nerdist.com. Now, it should go without saying that in order to break this down, we kinda need to spoil what happens in Moon Knight Episode 3. So if you haven't seen it yet, leave now before it's too late.
That's it, time out. Guys, let's all calm down, yeah? We're all worked up. Let's all just chill the F out and talk for a second.
Alright, let's get into it, shall we? This episode pays particular homage to the Fist of Khonshu Moon Knight miniseries. Those stories saw Marc Spector haunted by a need to visit Egypt, compelled to visit the place where he first gained his powers. It's an adventure with numerous gods and pyramids, and it's sparked by him selling a statue of Khonshu, and that separates Marc from his patron god, much like we'll see by the episode's end. The episode itself begins with Layla meeting Ligaro, an old colleague of her father's. Ligaro may actually be a deep-cut reference to another Marvel character with Egyptian roots. Created by Steve Dahlman in 1940's daring mystery comics number 6, Ligaro is the alter ego of Dynaman, a superhero active during the 4th Dynasty era of ancient Egypt. And much like the character for whom Layla's father is named, Abdul Faul the Scarlet Scarab, Ligaro also once fought alongside the invaders during World War II. Here, though, it just seems that this is a super deep-cut reference. Now, speaking of Layla's father, though, we get further confirmation that he was an archaeologist working on dig sites for rare relics. This basically confirms that Layla is the reimagined version of Marlene Al-Raoun, Marc Spector's love interest and partner in crime fighting from the comics. Layla says whatever happened in that desert is lost to the sands. Well, what happened in that desert was referenced last week in Marc's Interpol file, the archaeological site homicides. In Moon Knight number 1, Marc Spector is part of a mercenary team led by the evil Bushman that murders a bunch of people at an archaeological dig site, including Marlene/Layla's father. As we see over the course of this episode, it sure sounds like Marc was involved in exactly the same thing. And by the end of the episode, Marc knows it, Arthur Harrow knows it, and Layla probably knows it deep down as well, even if she doesn't want to admit it. Back in Egypt, Harrow is following the Scarab's trail to Ammit's tomb when Kennedy informs him that Marc Spector is hot on their trail. As a reminder, Bobby Fitzgerald and Billy Kennedy are the two who posed as detectives in Episode 2. They're also live-action versions of two of Ammit's henchmen of the same name from the Jeff Lemire and Greg Smallwood run. Now, whether they are secretly jackal-headed demons in disguise, though, well, only time will tell. In Cairo, Marc brings his fists to a knife fight only to lose control when he sees Steven's reflection in the knife. When he blacks back in, he awakens in a cab headed to the airport. He spots Harrow's men yet again and chases them until Steven interrupts him from a nearby mirror. This time, though, when Marc blacks back in, he's in the middle of brutally murdering all three of these goons. Now, Marc wasn't in control at the time, and Steven claims it wasn't him, which raises a question that many fans have been wondering about since the show was first announced. Is there a third alter beyond Marc Spector and Stephen Grant? The prevailing theory is that this is either Khonshu taking the wheel and using them as this meaty mech suit, or it's Jake Lockley coming out to wreak havoc, which is very different than the comics. Now, in the comics, Moon Knight has three distinct alters: Marc Spector, the host identity who's the muscle of the operation, Stephen Grant, the Wall Street millionaire who finances things, and Jake Lockley, a street-smart cab driver that doesn't really murder people so much as he helps gather information. So far, though, the show is only focused on the dichotomy between anxious book-smart Stephen and brash and blunt Marc. How they'll reimagine Jake, if at all, is anybody's guess, but so far it seems like he's a straight-up murderer. And speaking of straight-up murder, we see that Khonshu has no qualms at all about crossing lines that Stephen won't.
I kind of draw a line there at child murder.
Despite Marc's concerns, he tries to intimidate the young cultist, but the kid chooses death over what he perceives as dishonor.
I thought he'd talk.
Khonshu is remarkably blasé about the whole affair, but Marc and Steven are mostly focused on arguing with each other. Next, Khonshu summons a meeting of the Ennead by causing an eclipse in the middle of the day. And between alien invasions, half the population disappearing, and a massive celestial erupting from the Earth, this must have just seemed like a pretty normal thing to happen in comparison. A portal then takes Marc and Steven inside the Great Pyramid of Giza before an array of statues of the Egyptian deities. As we mentioned in previous breakdowns, the Ennead have a long history in Marvel Comics, dating all the way back to 1950's Marvel Tales number 96. The gods in attendance are Horus, Isis, Tefnut, Osiris, and Hathor to hear Khonshu plead his case. Interestingly enough, it doesn't seem like this is the full 9 gods that Steven mentioned back in episode 1.
They've got 7 gods here, and the Iliad has 9.
So where are the others? Well, maybe these are the only ones who remain.
I fired 2 of them for being late.
Khonshu claims they abandoned humanity, but Horus's avatar claims humanity abandoned them. But speaking of those gods, each one already exists in the comics as well. Horus, Isis, and Osiris all debuted in Thor 239, Tefnut was mentioned in a Marvel handbook, and Hathor has appeared in many forms over the years, first as the lion god in Avengers 112, and much later as both Hathor and Sekhmet in the Amadeus Cho series Prince of Power. During the trial, Khonshu admonishes the gods to return from the opulence of the Overvoid. This is one of the many names for celestial Heliopolis, the dimension from which the Egyptian gods actually hailed in the Marvel Universe. It first appeared in 1975's Thor 240, but played a much more prominent role in 2016's Moon Knight #2, where it was referred to as the Other Void, not the Overvoid. Essentially, it's what Asgard is to the Norse gods, but for the Egyptian gods. Unfortunately for Khonshu, Arthur Harrow is a much more persuasive debater, even if he is a total wiener for weaponizing Marc and Steven's dissociative identity disorder against them. Hathor's avatar takes pity on Marc, though, and sends him on the trail of Senfu's sarcophagus. Undercover in classic MCU fashion, wearing a black hat pulled low, Marc totally beefs his investigation, but thankfully Layla arrives in the nick of time to save the day. What follows is a tense conversation as they ride a boat to go see a man named Mogart who knows a thing or two about stolen sarcophagi. Created by Doug Munch and Bill Sienkiewicz, Anton Mogart first appeared in 1981's Moon Knight #3. A serial art thief, he earned the moniker Midnight Man for a rash of thefts taking place at, you guessed it, midnight. Mogart is played here by the late great Gaspar Ulliel, who died in a tragic skiing accident back in January. The episode during the credits is dedicated to his memory as well. On Mogart's Island, they are greeted by Beck, a character named for Karish Beck, a very minor villain in Moon Knight #18. This doofus tragically died after falling onto his own bandolier full of glass knives with acid inside of them, which... come on, dude. That's like an OSHA violation times 100. Here, though, he seems much more competent, but he still dies. Anyway, Beck mentions Layla's previous dealings with Mogart in Madripoor. As you may remember, we last saw Madripoor in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where Sharon Carter had installed herself as the power broker, the de facto ruler of that island nation's criminal underworld. And considering who Layla knows, there's a very good chance that she's knocked back to Smiling Tiger or two with Sharon Carter at the Brass Monkey as well. Mogart is practicing what Marc refers to as El Merma games. This upper Egyptian tradition pits riders on horseback against one another to show off their ability with a long bamboo spear, horse dancing, and other feats of equestrian skill. Mogart says that his treasures are more than a collection and that he feels a responsibility to preserve history, and that is another callback to his comic book counterpart. Despite numerous high-profile heists, Midnight Man simply stole things to own them rather than to sell them on the black market. As Marc studies Senfu's cartonnage clues with Steven's help, Arthur arrives to stir the pot even further. Not only does he heavily insinuate that Marc is responsible for Layla's father's murder, but he also uses his crocodile cane to destroy the sarcophagus. In the distraction, Marc summons the suit and uses some well-placed moonerangs and his bulletproof cape to take down Mogart's hired guns. During the increasingly brutal melee, Steven takes control temporarily, shifting from the ceremonial armor into the Mr. Knight costume.
Sorry.
2 spears through his torso later, though, he changes his tune.
Take the body back.
Fortunately, Layla's necklace wasn't just for fashion, it also has function, as a pair of crescent blades worthy of Moon Knight himself. Tensions then rise between Marc and Layla as they escape to the desert to fix Senfu's map of the stars. Once Marc finally lets Steven take over, he instantly solves the mystery. Despite the Ennead's warnings about meddling with the sky, Khonshu then uses his powers to shift the sky back to how it appeared 2,000 years ago. And while it looks awesome, doing so leads to Khonshu being imprisoned in stone and severed from Steven and Marc. Now, there is a comic book precedent for this shocking moment as well. Along with Marc renouncing the mantle, this is not the first time that Ennead drama has separated him from Khonshu. In West Coast Avengers #41, Khonshu left Marc behind to go fight the Egyptian serpent deity Seth. Expecting to die in battle, Khonshu releases Moon Knight from his control. But in the comics, Marc always finds a way back to Khonshu, so with that said, they'll all be together again soon, I'm pretty sure of it. During the end credits, we see a picture of young Layla with her father, and there's also a scarlet cloth in the background, hinting at the importance of the Scarlet Scarab character as well. Whether or not we'll truly see Layla take on that mantle is yet to be seen, but with 3 episodes left to go, anything is possible. Anyway, folks, there you have it. That is everything we spotted in Moon Knight Episode 3. We'll have even more coverage on Nerdist in the days ahead, but for now, tell us, what did you think of this episode? Did you spot anything that we missed?
Sorry, if you expect my help, it's not going to be while I'm imprisoned.
Do you want a bloodbath?
Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.